I call the member for Aston.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Why are we debating this motion today and this year? Why are business leaders calling for Newstart to go up today? Why are some welfare agencies calling for Newstart to go up today? And the reason is, and why is that the case, given that Newstart hasn't changed that much over the last few years, but has been indexed according to CPI across all of those years? But the reason is, Mr Deputy Speaker, is because the cost of living has been going up so dramatically over the last 5 years under the Labor government, and particularly in many of the essential costs which lower income people bear as a greater proportion of their income than other people. We know, for example, that electricity costs have gone up 66%, water 59%, gas 39%, childcare 21%, and many of these costs have been due to government policy. And given these essentials have been going up so rapidly, I can understand from the member for Melbourne, and I can understand the calls for an increase in the dole because the value of it may have diminished over time. And it will diminish, of course, further once the carbon tax is in play come the 1st of July. But I do not support this motion as it stands, Mr Deputy Speaker. First, because our priority should be addressing the cost of living pressures for everybody, particularly ditching the carbon tax and the mining tax and lowering general taxes and making our economy more efficient so that cost of living pressures are downwards for everybody. That should be the most important priority. The second priority, Mr Deputy Speaker, is to make it easier for those people who are unemployed to get access to work. And that means looking at our industrial relations framework and making it easier for employers to employ people who are on the dole, give them a chance, and yet have the flexibility, if it is not working, to reasonably lay them off under a fair framework, Mr Deputy Speaker. And we know that the current regime does not provide that incentive. So that should be our second priority, Mr Deputy Speaker, rather than increasing the Newstart. And thirdly, Mr Deputy Speaker, I don't believe that there should be any increase in the dole without some broader reforms to the welfare system, particularly an increase of the magnitude which the member for Melbourne is talking about. And these reforms should be governed by the guiding principle that Newstart be an adequate safety net, but it should not become a disincentive to work. And this is critical, Mr Deputy Speaker. Newstart is a safety net for people who are facing tough times, but it should not be a destination of choice. And so I believe that if we are to move on unemployment benefits in any way upwards, then it must be accompanied by some tougher actions to ensure that all able-bodied people are encouraged to work. And in this regard, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm from the school of tough love. People, of course, must be supported to get work, but if they did not take a reasonable job offer, then we must be clear about cutting off their welfare payments, because I don't believe that we do anybody a service by allowing them to stay on welfare when there is a viable choice for that person to take. Because ultimately, the longer the person sits on unemployment benefits, the more incapacitated they'll become over time. That leads to welfare dependency and it leads to incapacitation. And I think that it is also the proper right of a taxpayer to say we're happy to support unemployment benefits, but people have to take responsibility to take a job if one is available there. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, in a similar vein, I think we need to create greater incentives for longer-term unemployed people to move to take work. We know that there are many jobs in some parts of Australia which are going begging, and there are other parts of Australia where there are many people who are unemployed. And critically, I think we need to create the incentives and the culture for people who are unencumbered to move to where the jobs are. Finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, I think we need to introduce greater reciprocity into welfare payments for able-bodied people. There is a social contract with the dole that we will make payments to unemployed people to support them during tough times, but we expect responsibility in return. and responsibility to give back through work for the dole program, and responsibility to be a good citizen if the taxpayer is supporting their existence. Mr Deputy Speaker.